Good morning everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel Leaf Classes. I am Anjali. Children, in the previous video I gave you the PDF for the topic Introduction to Object-Oriented Programming Concepts, and today we will be discussing the solution. And I suppose all of you have made your practice notebook and you have already written the questions. The solutions I am giving you, please check your solutions with mine. If anywhere the correction is required, please do that. And I wish you all the best for the preparation as we begin the first chapter of the syllabus, right? So the first question is differentiate between compiler and interpreter. Children, these two are the translators. Translators that convert the high level language into machine level language. We know that the computer understands only machine level language, only the machine code. But we are writing the program, we are giving the program to the computer in high level language. Various high level languages we use. Say Java is also the high level language. So to make the computer understand the program, what we have written, what we want the computer to do, we need the translator. And we have two translators, compiler and interpreter, that convert high level language code to machine level language. The question for this can be asked for similarity also. What is the similarity between compiler and interpreter, or the difference, right? The difference here also I have written. I'll explain you also. Compiler is a translator that scans the entire program written in high level language and translates the whole of it into machine code at a time. It translates, it checks the entire program for the error, and if any errors are there, it will give you the error listing, and it does not go line by line. The whole program it scans and converts that to machine code, right, or the object code. An interpreter translates just one statement of the high level language at a time into machine code. It goes step by step, statement by statement, and compiler does the whole program scanning at the same time. The whole program is scanned at the same time. And in compiler, the error listing is displayed for the whole program after the compilation process. You get all the errors. Suppose 5 errors are there in your program, you will get the listing of all those 5 errors together. But in interpreter, it displays the error one line at a time, right? So this is the difference. You can take the screenshot, and I hope all of you must have done it correctly also. And the similarity, when it is asked, you will write compiler and interpreter both are the translators that convert high level language to machine level language. I hope the similarity and difference is clear to you. Question number 2 is to differentiate between procedure-oriented programming and object-oriented programming. Children, we are doing Java and we know Java is object-oriented programming, but you have to prepare the difference between procedure-oriented and object-oriented. See here, I have written the first point. Let me read this and then I'll explain you. The emphasis is put on function rather than data in procedure-oriented. And on object-oriented, the emphasis is put on data rather than the functions. Procedure means function, function is a task. Task means procedure. So how you are going to prepare this? Because many children, they get confused and then they write reverse. The difference, what the points are there for procedure, they write in object-oriented, and the points of object-oriented, they write in procedure-oriented. But I don't want you to make that mistake. So the function means the procedure, right? So in procedure-oriented programming, the emphasis is given on the function. That means how the task is being performed. So emphasis is on procedure, that is the function, rather than the data, right? Data is not that important in procedure-oriented programming. And in object-oriented programming, you know that in object-oriented programming, every entity is taken as an object. and object we always refer to the data which is belonging to the object. So the emphasis is put on data, that is the object, right? So emphasis is put on data rather than the function. So in procedure oriented, procedure, that is function, is important, and here the data, that is the object, is important. And the second difference is data can move freely throughout the program. If you have taken any variable, that variable can be used in any of the function anywhere in the program. In procedure oriented programming, there is no restriction for the data. But in object oriented programming, the data flow is restricted. We restrict that only this particular function can use this variable, other functions cannot. Like that, the restriction is put. We specify different access specifier also. It is up to the programmer, we make it public, private, how we want the data to move. So the data flow is restricted. It can be used in the specific program area depending upon the need, depending upon the code what we have given. So I hope the difference is clear, and the key point is that you have to just remember procedure का मतलब function. So procedure oriented में function पे ज़्यादा emphasis होगा and object oriented में data किसको रेफर करता है, object को, तो उसमें ज़्यादा emphasis होगा. I hope it is clear to you. Question 3 is to define the 4 principles of object-oriented programming. Children, you know that we have 4 principles: data abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism, and encapsulation. So one by one, I will give you the definition of all these. Data abstraction, it is an act of providing essential information or features and hiding their background details. So what is required, only that is presented, and rest all is hidden in the background. And this is related to the user and it changes from one perspective to another. I have written here also, it is always relative to the purpose or user. So what I have written here, if in the definition it is asked, you can give the definition till here only. You don't have to write that. I have just written that to explain you. Let me take the example of car, right? The person who is the owner of the car, for him the price of the car, the fuel consumption, what is the average mileage, all that matters. So what is important for him? All these things. Say suppose you are just sitting at the back seat. For you, whether it is comfortable or not, whether it is neat and clean, that is there or not, for you that is important. For the service engineer or the mechanic of the car, where is the circuit, how all the parts are functioning properly or not, that is important. For the production company, how many cars of that model are produced, that is important. So we have seen the object is same, the object is car, but from different perspective the essential features are changing. So that feature is known as data abstraction, right? The next definition is for inheritance. Children, this term you have done in your biology also. Inheriting means acquiring, right? So if a class is acquiring the properties of some another class, that feature, that property is known as inheritance. It is the process where one class acquires the properties of another class. If definition is asked, you can write till here. What I have written with black, that is just for the explanation. The class which inherits the properties of another class is known as subclass or the child class or the derived class. And the class whose properties are inherited are known as superclass or the base class or the parent class. So different terms are there. And the examples I can take here, I have written over here. Furniture. If furniture is a class, the two types of furniture, wood and metal. So whether it is wood furniture or metal furniture, it will acquire the properties of the furniture. And table and bed, these two are the classes of wood. So wood properties will go to table and bed will also acquire the properties of wood. Similarly, table class will acquire the properties of metal class, and metal class properties will also be given to bed class. So this is inheriting, and this promotes the reusability. We don't have to define that again. We can use the properties which are already defined in the base class or the super class. I hope these two definitions are clear to you. Please check what you have to write. Read the question carefully. Suppose the example is given furniture, wood, metal. Now it can be asked that which is the base class or the super class or the derived class or the child class. So you should know. Children, although I have given you the list of the questions, but something I am explaining here, something extra also. So please listen to that and perform very well in your exams. The next definition is of polymorphism. It refers to the process of using a function for more than one purpose. Children, in maths you have drawn polygon. Polygon means a shape with many sides, more than one, right? So here also, wherever this polymorphism definition will be asked, you have to write that a process which is used or a function which is used for more than one purpose, many purposes, the same function name is used, that is polymorphism. So with the word poly, you remember many, and the function which is used for many purposes, more than one purpose, is known as polymorphism. We can take the example in your syllabus. If you will go through the syllabus, it is written that these definitions with the real life example. So I am giving you all that. So duck. Duck is a name of a bird also, and if the batsman is out at 0, we say duck, right? So the spelling is same, the pronunciation is same, but it is used for different purpose in different context. Similarly, play. Play means khelna. The child has gone for playing, right? And the play is what you present on stage, that is also a play. So here these two terms I have taken as example, which can be used for different purpose in different contexts. Then the fourth definition is encapsulation. Encapsulation means the wrapping of data and functions into a single unit, that is known as class. So wrapping up of all data and functions together to make a single unit, that is encapsulation. The example, car, house. Now if you have a car, you don't say I have 4 wheels, I have 1 steering, 2 seats, 2 mirrors, all that you will not say. You will say I have 1 car. Similarly, if you say about your house, you will not say I have 2 rooms, 3 rooms, 1 kitchen, 1 dining room. You say I have a house. So all the data and the functions, they are wrapped together to make a single unit, that is known as encapsulation. Is it clear? Question number 4 is to mention the features of Java language. Children, here I have mentioned 4. If how many features you have to write, it is not mentioned, then you can specify only 2 features. That is sufficient, okay? So one by one we will take. Java is an object-oriented programming language. So it is very simple. You don't have to learn like anything, because we are doing object-oriented programming only. Then the second is Java programs are both compiled as well as interpreted. This is the language where both the translators are used. Compilation also and interpretation also. I'll be explaining you that in the next questions. Next is, it is a case sensitive language. So all of you have done the programming of Java, where we are supposed to write in capital. We have to give in capital. We cannot write that in small case. So here uppercase and lowercase characters are treated differently. And then the fourth point is it can access data from a local system as well as from the internet. Initially, when Java was started, it was started for internet applications only, but because of its so many good features, it was adopted as a good programming language. So it has the feature of accessing the data from a local system as well as from the internet. I hope these four features are clear to each one of you. Question number 5 is, who developed Java and what was it initially called? I hope all of you know this answer. James Gosling and his colleagues at Sun Microsystems, they developed Java language, and it was initially called Oak. Oak trees were in front of his office, so based on the tree's name only, he named this language as Oak, and afterwards the name was changed to Java language. Okay. Question number 6 is to give two types of Java programs, and here I have written. First is Java application, which is used for standalone system. So it can be executed on the system at client or server level. And the second type is Java applets. These are also termed as internet applets, and the Java program written in Java applets can be included in HTML page, like all of you know that the page which is written for web designing or web page, that is HTML. So these internet applets are used, they can be included in that. So we have two types, Java applications and Java applets. Question number 7 is, a Java program uses compiler as well as interpreter. Explain that. So here I have written, before reading this, I would like to explain you this. Java source code. Source code means the Java program which we are writing. That is given to the compiler. Compiler is a translator which converts the source program into an intermediate code. That code is known as bytecode, right? So here directly compiler does not convert the source program into machine code. It converts the source program into an intermediate code that is known as bytecode, and then this bytecode is given to the interpreter which converts that into object code depending upon the system on which you are working. So for the explanation, you can draw the figure like this along with the written material, like here. Java compiler converts the source code into an intermediate code which is known as bytecode, which is then given to the interpreter that converts it into object code, and that object code is only executed to get the result. Question number 8, we have to write 4 definitions. The first one is source code. The program written in high level language that needs to be converted into machine level language is known as source code or the source program. The program which we write in Java language is known as the source program. So let us do the second definition, bytecode. Before this also I explained to you bytecode. Java compiler converts the source code into an intermediate binary form. That form is known as bytecode, right? The third is object code. The program that is already converted into the machine level language is known as the object program or the object code. And the last definition here is Java virtual machine. In Java, the Java interpreter is only known as Java virtual machine. Why? Because it is, although a software, Java interpreter is a software, but due to its nature of conversion of bytecode from multiple source codes, it is known as Java virtual machine. Although it is a software, but since it converts from many sources, it is taking and converting that into object code. So the Java interpreter is also termed as Java virtual machine. Question number 9 is, what are reserved words? Name any 4. The word reserve refers to that you cannot use it for some other purpose. It is already reserved, it is already booked for something, right? So the same thing is here also. Reserved words are the keywords which have some special meaning to the Java compiler and cannot be used for naming the variables in the program. We cannot use these words for naming any variable because they carry some special meaning. They have some special meaning in Java compiler, and compiler recognizes them with that purpose only. So they are not allowed for naming the variables. The examples: public, void, class, int, double, float, char, string, all these are the reserved words which you cannot use for naming any variable. The next question is question number 10, that is, name the package that is invoked by default in the program. So we have java.lang. This is the package name. Some children, they write few letters of this or one letter of this in capital, then the marks will be cut over there. So you have to write this entire thing in small because Java is case sensitive language. So we have to take care of uppercase and lowercase characters. Now we move on to question number 11, where the significance of public, static and void words is asked. This question I have taken from previous year questions. Public. Public means which is available to every member, right? So it is an optional keyword. If you don't write public before the function name, then also by default it is public. Public indicates that the function is available to all the members of the class. Public visibility means everybody can use that and can access that. Then the second keyword is static. This indicates that the function can be executed without creation of the object. When you write the program main, like the statement which is given in the question, public, static, void, main, so you don't create any object for the main, right? For using main function, we don't create any object. So static word is given for that. That object creation is not required if you write any function with static keyword. And the third keyword is void. If void is given before the function name, that will indicate that that function is not going to return any value. So all the functions where we write void before the function name will not have any return statement within the body of the function. So this is the meaning of all these three keywords which we write when we declare main function in our program. Please let me know in the comment section whether the solution provided by me is helping you in the preparation of topic or not. Please share the video with your ICSE friends also. If you haven't subscribed the channel yet, please do subscribe and press the bell icon so that you get the notifications for all the videos and no important topic is missed by you. You can join us on our Telegram channel also. The link is there in the description box. Keep practicing, keep working hard, keep growing, keep learning. God bless you, children.